Almost 2 years ago, we convened a panel on this program to discuss education in Ontario as students dealt with the first virtual learning of the pandemic. As kids are again staying home from school, hopefully for just a 2 week closure, it seemed like a good time to check back in with that panel for some perspective on where we've been and where we're going next. With us for that, all in Ontario's capital city, Prachi Srivastava, professor specializing in education and global development at Western University, currently a visiting prof at McGill University. Annie Kidder, executive director of People for Education, and Caroline Alfonso, education reporter for the Globe and Mail. Welcome back to you all. And just before we start, in the interest of full disclosure, let me remind people that TVO is a provider of the province's distance and online learning through the ILC. The Independent Learning Center has been a distance learning partner with the Ministry of Education for almost 100 years. Hi, it's very nice to see you all.
Hi, Nam. Nice to
Thank
see you
you.
too.
Thank you for having us.
Here we are with the fourth mass school closure in Ontario since March of 2020. I wanted to get from all of you your perspective. Like when you heard that this was happening again, what was your reaction? Caroline, I'll start with you.
Well, I was seeing this play out across the country in different provinces. I was working last week where I was reporting on what was happening in Nova Scotia and then BC and then Alberta. So I kind of figured that it was Ontario's turn to do the same. Um, we had the announcement from the Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Kieran Moore, last week saying schools would be delayed until Wednesday, a 2-day delay. So I think as a parent, as a mom myself, and talking to friends who are other parents, we thought, okay, maybe they will go back to school on Wednesday. And then I think a lot of parents, a lot of families, a lot of kids were crushed to learn that they would be online for at least 2 weeks.
And Caroline, you used the word crush. Why do you think parents had that reaction?
Well, I think, we have learned over this time that kids want to be in school. They need to be in school. They are little social beings who want to be around their friends and around their teachers. They want to be playing at recess outside. Being in front of the computer, especially for kindergarten kids, grade 1 kids, those early younger grades is difficult for long stretches of time. It's tiring. They want to be running around. They want to be interacting. So I think, knowing what we know about online learning from how long have we been doing this now, knowing what we know about it, I think, a lot of parents, a lot of families were just devastated to hear that it was happening again.
And Annie, yes, we've been here again before, and this is the fourth mass school closure in Ontario. When you heard that students were going back to learning online, what was your reaction?
Well, I think not surprised, sadly. We'd had the report from the science table in the middle of December that did the modeling that showed we were going to be in a mess. They suggested a circuit breaker, really shutting everything down, and partly in order for schools to open. We didn't do that. So and it seemed like even when they said they were going to delay it by 2 days, it was really hard to understand what real things could get done in 2 days in order to make it possible for schools to open. So I was sadly not surprised, and like Caroline, really worried, though I'm not sure they could have done anything else about the impact that this is having on kids, on families, and it's a future impact, which I think sometimes hard for people to wrap their head around or being willing to think about. But the impact is big, and because, as you said, this is the fourth time, and it's nearly 2 years now of a lot of disruption and a lot of kind of insecurity for kids and families, which is not good for kids and young people.
You mentioned the future because I think a lot of us, it's so hard to think about what's going to happen next week, next month. Why is it important for us to consider the future repercussions from this?
Well, I think that, 2 years ago, the UN warned about the potential of a generational catastrophe. And that sounds, like catastrophizing literally. But in the end, we're seeing a lot of research now, not so much from Ontario, there definitely could be more, about the potential impact. And so it's yes, next week feels, really worrying, and next month. But for kids that are young, so for some of them, this is all of their time in school. For kids all the way through school, and it's not just like that sort of strict sense of learning loss itself, but there are disproportionate impacts on kids. And I've talked to parents I talked to one parent whose kid had 6 English teachers in the last year and a half, because it's been a problem for staffing. It's been a problem in many ways. Those kinds of things have an impact on kids' mental health, their sense of well-being, and that lasts. So we really have to think about what we're doing. We'll get to this, but what are our future plans in order to address all of the impact that's having right now? And we have to remember, and that this is 2 million kids in Ontario, and they're all of our futures. So we really have to make sure that they're okay and better than okay.
Prachi, I have 2 kids. My son just turned 11 and my daughter is 8. And in September, we were kind of holding our breath because we thought that they might end up going back online. Nothing, it didn't happen then, but it's happened now. What's your reaction to this latest school closure, or schools actually moving to online learning?
My reaction is always looking at the systems level. And I've been, I think, as most people working in the sector and general society, I think we've just been shocked at the lack of planning, at the lack of forward planning in the face of what is quite a predictable outcome. So, the fact that there were a host of measures that were recommended at the societal level, in terms of how we might be able to close other sectors of society, how we should actually be prioritizing education workers the same as we prioritize health workers, how we should have availability to mass rapid testing. There's a host of other measures that we need to think about. And the fact that none of those things were really implemented in a timely manner, along with the fact, and I think the bigger issue really here is, if we're going to bring the focus back onto the education sector planning, there hasn't been any real plan, medium term or long term, for any curricular adaptation, for really thinking about how to ensure education continuity, whether it's in person or virtually, in a way that is equitable and in a way that is actually possible in the context that we're in. And so I think the frustration is, looking at it from that perspective, the frustration really on my end has to do with the lack of planning. And before we get into knee-jerk reactions about resources and a whole host of other issues, which are usually used as kind of, I would say, lazy reasons, really, to justify something that is inexplicable, we need to understand 2 very important things. Number one, we are a G7 country. And I think what people really need to understand what that means. A G7 country implies you are in a group of 7 countries, which are the most highly industrialized and relatively best resourced liberal democracies in the world. So when we start with the premise that we don't have resources, we really need to question how it's possible that a G7 country is a G7 country on the one hand, and then says doesn't have any resources. You can't have it both ways. And the second part is, we also, among the group of G7, have one of the smallest cohorts of children in elementary and secondary school. Across Canada, we're roughly at around 5 million, 5.2 million, and 2.1 million of those students are here in Ontario. So what I'm trying to say is that the resources are quite large for a relatively smaller demographic in a country that has actually a relatively well-developed system of education. When you start with those circumstances and those conditions, and we entered this pandemic in a time of relative peace. We're not in civil conflict. We don't have civil war. We are relatively peaceful. We have one of the largest bureaucracies comparatively in the world. And what that means is we have an administrative structure that is well developed. It is really difficult to understand how, when we have those conditions, we are now in the third year of academic disruption without a plan. It's one thing to say, oh, we didn't really see it coming in March of 2020, although people who study pandemics and global health would have said that actually we should have been more prepared. Well, fine, let's say that was the case. We're now in January 22. We have access to a host of other technologies that just weren't available: vaccines, rapid tests. I mean, in theory, they're all there. And we have within our country the systems to be able to plan. So, what we end up seeing is this ad hoc policy on the fly for education, in Ontario in particular. This province has the largest cohort of elementary and secondary school students, and yet we've had the longest school closures. And we don't start at 0. We start at 26 because we've already had 26 weeks of school closures since March of 2020, compared to Quebec, for example, which had 10 or 11 weeks. And so when now we have an extra 2 weeks, you need to understand that those closures, the effects of those closures are cumulative. So we have to start at 28 weeks. Every time there is an extended closure, we have to add it on to the existing closures that were already there.
Prachi, you mentioned curriculum. We're going to come back to that in a few moments. But Annie, Prachi said this was a predictable outcome, and it could have been prevented. And even with the 2 weeks that we've been given, a lot of people are asking questions. What's going to be done in those 2 weeks to make schools safer for teachers, for students, for everybody? In your view, what should the government have done that they didn't do in order to keep schools open?
Well, and I think it's not just safer, right? Yes, safer, but also with all of the appropriate supports in terms of ensuring that kids are able to recover and, thrive and move forward. And I think that Prachi brings up an incredibly important point about the lack of planning. It's been kind of extraordinary that there's been no plan. So even in the press conference, with the premier, when they announced that schools would be closed for another 2 weeks, all of the media said, so what are you going to do in those 2 weeks to make sure schools can open permanently? And there was actually no answer. So I run a nonprofit. In nonprofits, you're accountable and you have to have goals. And some people say you have to have goals they call SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so we are looking for, and we've made recommendations to the province for setting those goals and being accountable for those goals, so that when schools reopen, we have prioritized booster shots for all of the education staff. We've got vaccination centers in schools, so we're getting all of the 5 to 11-year-olds vaccinated we possibly can, because that rate's really low right now. It's like, let's use this time to get the N95 masks, to distribute the funding that was promised last spring, that has still not been distributed at schools. We're in the middle of surveying all the principals in Ontario, and they are writing us the saddest, sort of most pleading kind of messages, saying people need to understand what we're trying to do here. They're commending their staff, but they're really, really worried. They're worried about the well-being of their students, and they're worried that they too, just like us, are hearing what's going to happen next in the media. So they have no time to prepare, they have no time to think it through, and they're not being consulted with. So one of our other things we've been saying for, I don't know, it feels like forever now, is that there should be an education advisory task force. Why aren't we listening to people like Prachi, to principals, councils, the directors of education, teachers, parents, students, together with health experts in health, so that they're all working together to use evidence, expertise, and their experience on the ground to give good advice to the province. And right now, it does feel like, that is the part that's upsetting, is the lack of planning, short or long term. And it feels like it's driven by politics, or by, one person phoning the premier, or, everybody arguing about what's the, kind of least worst choice or most palatable choice, but we're not thinking, I don't think, about kids and about their future and really understanding the deep impact of this. And I know it's hard. It's definitely hard on the economy. I'm in a family full of artists who have all lost work, who have, so there are lots of people without jobs, businesses that have had to close. We have to have that in there too. But Prachi is also right. We're an incredibly rich country. So it's going to take a combination of the federal government and provincial governments, but the plan has to be there, and it has to be informed by knowledge, by experience, by evidence, and that's frustratingly not what we're seeing right now.
And Caroline, I want to bring you into this because Annie mentioned, Prachi mentioned the planning, the lack of planning, and Annie brought up, it seems as if we're living in an environment where we're all learning this information at the same time. When you talk to teachers, what are you seeing from them, and maybe the situation that they've been put in where some people might think that they don't want to go back into the classes because they don't feel safe, yet they also have children, and they have, when we do move into this virtual space, they have to juggle not only doing their job, but also taking care of their children.
I think, the teachers that I've come across really do want to be back in the classroom. They find that interactive face-to-face learning is best. That's how they were trained to teach, and that's how they would like to teach. The concern that I'm hearing from teachers is that what is, Annie has brought this up, and so has Prachi, what is in place for them to return to the classroom where it's safer? What measures are being taken so that there's 25, 30 kids in their room. Some of those kids have had perhaps one dose of the vaccine, some have had both. Kids under 5 haven't had a single dose yet. So what measures are being put in place so that they could feel safer in those rooms, because they would like to be there? We had 2 weeks of a holiday break. And it was only at the end of the 2 weeks that the province has announced that, education workers will receive N95 masks over time. More HEPA filters are being distributed to schools. It was at the end of that. And I think among the education workers that I've been speaking to, they are wondering why the government wasn't more proactive. They have been calling, many of them have been calling for better masks for teachers and school staff. Why hadn't that come before the holiday period so that it could have been rolled out in schools by this point in time, instead of throughout the month of January, when we possibly could return to the classroom and those measures would not be in place as yet. So I think at the end of the day, most people want to be in the school building, most people want to be in those classrooms, but what measures are being put in place so that they can be in those classrooms, right? And that is the challenge right now that everybody's facing.
You all three were on the show with Steve Paikin back in May 2020, and we wanted to show some of the points that you brought up when you were on the show, and to get to your reaction to how things have changed or how things have not changed. And we wanted to start with you, Prachi. Sheldon, could you please roll?
When we talk about automatic promotion, I'm not entirely sure that automatic promotion, in a context where we do not have indications yet from the government in terms of what the next school year is going to look like, whether or not that's a great idea. So, for example, if what we want is for children to enter, for example, grade 3 next year, they're in grade 2 right now, they want to enter grade 3 next year, what is that curriculum actually going to look like? I think the idea that teachers are going to have to catch up all the kids of whatever it is they missed in grade 2, and then on top of it, teach the grade 3 curriculum is just going to be stressful for the teachers, stressful for the children, and it's not the way that we'll be able to see learning gains. Probably what we want to do is see how we can reform that curriculum for next year and the year after, to actually take into consideration the effect of the pandemic on learning.
It feels strange that what you said last year applies to what's happening right now, because we all thought that things might have shifted a little bit. And again, that was from May 2020, and we know that there's been no re-examination of the curriculum. Prachi, how do you react to hearing your advice from almost 2 years ago?
I feel a bit of a broken record. That child who was in grade 2 in May of 2020 is now in grade 4 and will be in grade 5 in September of 22. And so we need to understand that that is a serious disruption. It's more aggravated than it was when I first made those comments. The recommendations of examining the curriculum throughout the entire cycle, so what we should be doing is looking at all the way through from JK through grade 12 and seeing which parts of the curriculum in every year need to be lengthened, which parts of the curriculum from that year should be brought into the following grade, and which parts of the previous grade's curriculum should be brought into that grade. And that should be done throughout the system. Secondly, we should be boosting core skills and introducing psychosocial skills throughout the curriculum for all children. And thirdly, we should actually be having targeted interventions for the schools that have seen the highest level of disruption, highest levels of numbers of cases, and within schools for the children that are coming from marginalized backgrounds and who also have special needs and who may have IEPs. Now, that is a comprehensive plan. The reason why the recommendation hasn't changed from 2 years ago is because the plan is coming from an emergency education provision and continuity literature. There's a whole literature base and a host of professionals, including teachers and education workers, who can actually contribute to that. And that's why those recommendations are still the same recommendations. The sad part of it is that there hasn't been any action on that from almost 2 years now. And as I started the segment, it defies logic. It defies belief how it's possible that in Canada we don't have a plan, given our resources, given the tremendous privilege that we have. It is unbelievable. One last point I'd like to make is about the connection between the education and the economy. We somehow, for some reason, and I think, again, this is a discourse framing, it's dangerous discourse problem, which is we somehow like to divorce education and the economy. And that is a fundamentally dangerous thing to do, because that is not at all the relationship. The relationship between the education and the economy is intimate. Based on global monitoring studies that have been done by some of the leading education economists in the world, what they're telling us is just 14 to 16 weeks of school closure, and Ontario, remember, is already double that, can lead to a GDP loss of up to 6% in a country like Canada. For a country like Canada, that is $95 billion of loss. And StatsCan did a study that said that students graduating from high school, college, and from their first degree can expect to see in their own personal income situation $20,000 to $40,000 loss over the next 5 years. These are real losses felt by real people, and that will have a broad socioeconomic effect in our country. The recovery period is going to outlive the virus.
Sorry, Prachi, to cut you off. I just realized we have about 5 minutes left, and I need to bring in Caroline. But I would also say that I think that all of us on this panel, where we are because of the education, and because we had a good education, we're able to contribute to the economy. So I take your point. Caroline, we're going to take a look at your clip from May 2020. Sheldon, please roll.
Which cohort of students do you think this pandemic has been most injurious to their education?
Well, I have a 5-year-old and 9-year-old at home, and the 5-year-old in SK is quite content just coloring and, building forts and having the best time and reading, and she's fine. I think the impact is the greatest for the high school kids, quite frankly. I think they are the ones who, especially the graduating class, those are the ones who were looking forward to those occasions of their graduation ceremonies and proms where they're held, and they're missing out on that. They are the ones who receive more feedback, I would imagine, from teachers. They are moving from class to class. They're working towards post-secondary or the workforce. And, those are the kids who are, I think, missing the most.
At the time in May 2020, you said high school kids. Would you answer that the same today?
It's funny watching that. One thing, I haven't aged that much now, which is a good thing. Those two children in my home are now 7 and almost 11. And I think we will not see really the impact for that age cohort until a few years down the line as they progress through the education system and we see sort of what happens with their academic achievement, especially for my 7-year-old. I think, for high school kids, it has been difficult. And I would agree with that. Imagine coming into grade 9 in high school. You lost part of your grade 9 year. Your grade 10 year was so disrupted. You had no extracurriculars. And you're in your grade 11 year and you're back home. Again, the government is saying no extracurriculars. So I think, you're almost done high school. And this has been the state of your high school experience. I think that is quite devastating for many high school kids.
And we're hearing that high school students after January 17th might be going back to in class.
Well, so there was an interesting story this morning by Robert Benzie at the Toronto Star. One of his sources said that fully vaccinated high school students could be returning potentially January 17th. But for my children, which will be so disheartening, the source also alluded to the fact that these kids could be at home potentially longer. So I think, all is up in the air, at least in my home right now, of what January 17th could potentially look like.
I'm with you, Caroline, because my kids will be home as well. Annie, we wanted to take a look at what you said back in May 2020 and then to get your reactions to it. Sheldon, please roll.
I think it's a great idea, a task force, that actually we're putting that in place right now, because there already have been calls for years, us among them, for, an evolution in public education, for thinking about the future of public education. And what we don't want to do is go Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid on top of the pandemic. And then how can we get sort of back to normal? And instead, it's how can we look at all the stuff that we've learned and kind of go forward, or, people are talking about bouncing forward as opposed to bouncing back. And we could be doing that. People are doing some incredible thinking about learning right now. There are conferences happening with people from all over the world now, which we wouldn't have been able to do before. So let's use it to make some changes, not just to address the pandemic, but for the long term.
Annie, as a parent, sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into the void when I'm talking about what's happening with my kids and not being able to have a consistent learning education over the past 2 years. Have we learned anything from the past 2 years of education in a pandemic?
Well, I am worried about my Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid comment, because I think it's still true. I do think, unlike Caroline, I have aged since then. It's shocking to see yourself. And my hair is way longer. No,
You
I
look
think
great.
that what's one of the things that's interesting, because nobody can go anywhere, we actually have been talking all around the world about education, and there's incredible thinking going on internationally and across Canada about what should it look like, what should we be doing. But there's a disconnect. Prachi is so right about how education and the economy are absolutely integrated, and there's a disconnect between all the thinkers and all the research going on and what we're actually seeing in our education systems all across Canada. And sadly, this has been true for as long as I've been doing this. There's so much politics in education. It's hard to get it to that point of, okay, it is 2022. We know a lot of cool stuff. How are we going to make that happen in our schools? So it's not even just a matter of going, what are we going to do about the curriculum? What can we leave out? What do we need to add to? But how can we, it's using the opportunity of this time, how can we transform curriculum too? Because we know a lot more. So principals, along with talking about how challenging this time has been, have also talked about what they've learned, what things are more effective, how technology can be used in a good way, not to replace in-person teaching, but in other kinds of ways. So we need the research, the knowledge, the thinking to move forward. But right now we haven't even seen our Minister of Education for a long time in Ontario, but we're not hearing that kind of great forward thinking and planning that would make people feel a little bit better, not that much, about the fact that their kids can't go to school right now, but it's okay because we're making the best plan possible.
Prachi, I'll give you the last 30 seconds. If the Minister of Education was watching right now, what would you say to him?
I think, the main thing is to have a plan and broad consultation and to really show that the priority is education because right until now we haven't seen that. And we have all the resources available to us. We have people that are willing to put in that time. Please just reach out and do the consultation that's required to secure the future of our province.
We really do appreciate all of your time. Everybody's multitasking. I know a few of us have had technology problems, but we really do appreciate your insight and knowledge in this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.